the passion ring loud and true. May the song within awaken and rise as a fragrance to you. Let it rise higher and higher, deeper and deeper still. Let the song awaken and
Good evening, everybody. This is the first of 3 meetings of the City Council budget review by the City Council, City of Littleton. It's 6 in the evening, and today is Monday, September 11th, 2017. And before we get started, I would like to just offer we take a moment of silence for the victims of 9/11 back in 2001, an attack on our soil that killed 3,000 people, injured over 6,000, and affected the friends and family probably in the tens of thousands. If you would join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. We have a work plan that shows us meeting from 6 to 9 each of the next 3 nights. It's been divided out into what we believe is a reasonable portion of time for the various issues that we need to discuss. Tonight is budget overview from the city manager and the finance director, and then policy questions for several departments up to police and including police. There's only 4 items that we need to move on to staff tonight that are policy items, but there are a number of discussions in each of these. There is a reward for promptness and efficiency, and that is the Broncos game is tonight, and our plan is to finish at 9 in the evening.
8:20 would be good.
8:20 is when the game starts. and I'm looking over to the police chief as the last presenter tonight. But I don't want there to be any pressure. The city manager is going to be basically running the meeting and answering most of the questions. The first part is primarily the budget overview presented by the city manager and the finance director. He'll be the one that will be working with the department heads to do the presentations, and as needed, I'll be asking for questions, or if I need to recognize somebody to make sure the conversation goes smoothly. But really, this is the opportunity for staff and the city manager to tell us as the policymakers how they see next year looking for them in the 2018 budget presentation. So really looking forward to that, looking forward to the enthusiasm that I know in talking to the city manager, staff has put into this project over the last several months. This is not easy, and we have a very well prepared and presented budget book to work off of tonight. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the city manager.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think Tiffany Hooten, our finance director, and I are going to tag team this here, and I think Earlene's going to run our PowerPoint. We have a hard copy of that. Kind of walk us through our discussion here this evening. Let's see, can we adjust that?
Thank goodness, I thought that was
Okay, well, as Mayor talked about this just a few minutes ago, this again is our schedule here. So we have roughly 30 minutes for an overview, and then hopefully the balance of the evening will be spent on several different departments. It's an opportunity here for the council just to discuss directly here with our department directors. You know, their proposed budget. There, thank you, Ken. Appreciate that. And so that's for Monday. Tuesday is kind of balance of the departments. And then for Wednesday, we've allocated some time. I'll give you some baseball signs or something.
I know, right? Sorry.
And for Wednesday, then we're going to talk specifically about some of our unfunded priorities, both on the operations side as well as capital. We've also allocated some time here to talk about some future funding options. We had a few weeks ago, we gave you kind of a pre-budget presentation there. We were talking about a fiscally constrained general fund and our capital fund, and the challenge that we face there. So we're going to allocate a little bit of time for future funding options. And then at the end of the evening on Wednesday, we also have a proposed fee increase that we would like council to consider here on the development side. I alluded to this in a previous email here to council that we were preparing this information. I think Jocelyn Mills, Jocelyn? you have hard copies of that ready for council? I'll ask her just to hand that out this evening here. And again, this is for Wednesday. Give you a couple of days to look at this. But I think it's our opinion that our fee schedule is based on some analysis that we did. We're basically on the bottom of the cost here when we compare ourselves to peers. And so we're going to be proposing a possible fee increase over multiple years here to get us to roughly the middle of our peer group. And so we'll focus that on Wednesday.
When you peer group, you mean what other cities are charging?
Yes. And
Because traditionally, we look at fees based on what the cost of the service is, and then we appropriate a fee accordingly, which is why we may look like we're not in that sweet middle.
I think the analysis will help you understand that. So it'll give you a view of how we compare to the actual cost. I'll give you an example. We don't charge anything for the engineering side on the development review. Nothing. So we're, in essence, subsidizing that from the general fund. So, again, this is an opportunity for you to decide if that's an important issue for you or not. But I thought it was our responsibility to show you that, based on our analysis, we don't believe we were certainly charging what other peer groups are. Okay, so kind of a general overview. Again, we talked with you a few weeks ago. We have developed a fiscally constrained general plan for the next 5 years, and certainly we've been doing that on the capital side. What we are proposing in the 2018 budget, certainly on the general fund, it is sustainable at that level. We'll also talk about the things that we're not funding here on Wednesday. I think some of the challenges that we have, Tiffany will touch on this in a few minutes here, but certainly the capital fund is probably the most significant issue we've got. And in our opinion, that is not sustainable over the 5 years, and that we will have some significant challenges in the capital fund. I will tell you that, we as department directors, we have used a very collaborative process trying to look at the needs that we have here. There is a lot of demand within our community for which we believe services should be considered. But however, just based on where we're at financially, we are proposing to you basically a status quo budget. Very few changes when we compare that to 2017. We do have a couple of notable examples here, and in part based on the conversation we had last year.
Good evening, Council. I just want to touch on a few things that really impacted our 2018 proposed budget this year. We kind of talked about these at several meetings in the past, but I just wanted to highlight them again, just so everyone understands the impacts of some of these things. The biggest impact that we have this year is the 2016 TABOR access to our minimum fund balance and to the general fund as a whole. As you know, Council, you've given direction for us to maintain a 17% fund balance, which is about 2 months worth of operating expenditures for the general fund. And when we had a TABOR excess in 2016, pending the outcome of the ballot, we're either going to have to transfer that to the capital projects fund or potentially refund it to citizens. Essentially what that does is it takes about $2 million from our coffers from the general fund. So that definitely did impact our estimates for 2017 and 2018 and going forward. I just wanted to mention the 2 ballot questions that are going to be out there. One is to retain this 2016 TABOR excess for specific capital projects, and we listed the 2, which is street infrastructure and I believe Bellevue and Bowles intersection. And then the other one is adjusting the TABOR base, and we've talked at length about that and what that means. It's very important for the city to have the ability to have an additional adjustment on their base. The other thing that I mentioned is property and liability costs. So just like your regular insurance, the city's property and liability costs continue to increase. It's based on many factors. It could be claims, it could be just costs inherently, and inflation and things like that. But the one thing that we haven't ever really had is a true funding mechanism for the property and liability fund. And what that means is that beginning in 2017 and going forward, we're going to have to dedicate more money from the general fund to help fund our property and liability costs. In the past, we've been able to use the general fund and some of the other liability funds to help manage that, but we no longer have that ability. So we're going to have a dedicated funding source, and the majority of that's going to be coming from property and liability. As an example, in 2017 and 2018, it's about $700,000. In the past, it's been about $200,000 to $300,000 to kind of give you an idea. The other thing that we needed to look at this year is our emergency medical services costs. And we're going to talk about this much more tomorrow when we discuss the fire department, but it definitely was a factor in the 2018 budget. Essentially what we needed to do is we needed to analyze the EMT division in the fire department and really understand the costs that are occurring in that fund. Also that in conjunction with some changes in personnel that have been moving more towards EMS-based services. And so we did take a look at that, and it does impact the 2018 budget and going forward. The other thing that we haven't done previously for any budget other than general fund and capital projects fund and the sewer fund is we would like to do 5-year financial projections for almost all of our funds. I think it's important to understand what our capital needs are for our impact fees, what our growth is going to be, so that we can plan for that accordingly. And the other one is the open space fund. So we're going to work with South Suburban to get an idea of what their capital needs are over the next 5 to 10 years, and I know they're working on that internally as well. So us working with them, we're going to be able to project out some projects for the next 5 years at least for the open space fund. And then again with the Conservation Trust Fund. Now the Conservation Trust Fund is a much smaller fund. It's funded by lottery proceeds. But again, it's about $200,000 a year, and so we want to have a really good 5-year capital plan for that fund as well. I think Mark is going to kind of highlight some things on the 2018 budget off this one.
Yeah, so we've already touched on this for the last couple of months here. So what we're proposing to the council is basically a status quo. We do have some heavy constraints here in our infrastructure. We talked a little bit about that when we presented the 5-year fiscally constrained plan. And just to kind of highlight a couple of specific issues, on the street maintenance side, starting in 2018, we will be spending basically the bare minimum allowed by state law, which matches with our HUTF fund, Highway User Tax Fund, which is roughly $1.4 million, if I remember correctly. Historically, we have spent nearly $3 to $4 million on here in the last couple of years at that level. So unfortunately, just based on where we're at in the capital, we're going to have to drop down street maintenance. Now, if the voters approve the Tabor issue in the first ballot measure, then we'll be adding 1.9 on that. But for the fiscally constrained next 5 years, we're showing that the street maintenance investment is just down to the bare minimum of HUTF. Fleet replacements is another issue. We actually began delaying some of those replacements in 2017, and so there is a pattern for the next 5 years of pushing out a lot of the fleet replacements simply because the funds do not exist to do it in the time it was originally anticipated. And so there's a cost to that. We do anticipate probably some higher maintenance costs over time. We've had some of that discussion internally already on very specific pieces of equipment. But in order for us to balance the capital fund, we've had to begin delaying the replacement of our fleet. And we're also going to start seeing that in years 3 and 4 in the information technology for this organization. So a lot of the replacements of our computers, software, will start to have to push out and delay some of those replacements simply because the funds are not there in the outer years. And again, that's our financial forecast as we see the conditions here. So, I think I've talked at length about this before, but, I think in order for us to kind of meet the challenge and overcome that, there's a series of recommendations that we're going to be making. The forecast right now for general fund transfers to the capital, we do not see that as an option. Now, that's not to say that as conditions come in, again, this is a model, it's a forecast, we could see in the future years maybe some ability here to transfer, but based on our analysis at this point, we do not see that as a strategy here for the long term. So I've kind of touched on the other 2 points here already. Okay, so again, kind of filling in some of this here. We do want to present kind of a fiscally constrained financial plan for the general fund, capital projects fund. We presented that before. We'll talk here tomorrow night a little bit about the sewer utility. We've raised some issues here this past month about that. We're going to show you how we suggest balancing that. We're also working on a fiscally constrained storm drainage fund. We haven't done that in the past, and that's another utility for which we believe we have some significant challenges. In order to kind of prepare ourselves for all of this, there's one of the strategies, of course, I've talked to you about is the priority-based budgeting. It's a way for us to kind of identify all the services we provide, what's the relative priority, what's the level of service that we're providing in order to meet that priority and the cost. We will talk more in depth with the council here, probably at the beginning of next year, about what that process truly means, and make sure the council is understanding and supportive of that. And then that helps us kind of understand our costs in the general fund specifically. And then in the first and second quarter of next year, we're going to be suggesting to you that we're going to have to look in much more detail about how we kind of meet the challenge within the capital fund and evaluate many different options here in order to kind of look at our long-term financial stability.
This next slide just kind of touches on some things that I wanted to just relay to council, some things that we're going to be doing different moving forward. One thing that I think is important is that we need to be updating you as council earlier in the year as possible for our fund balances and all of our funds. So we're going to try to get that to you around March or April, depending on the schedule. And I just want you to understand that we're still going to have audit adjustments after that, but it at least will give you an idea of where we are during the year and earlier in the year. And I think what that will also do is if we're looking to have any excesses in the previous year of something that you might want to look at that we haven't funded previously, it might give you an opportunity to see where we are and can we fund any additional projects. The other thing that I've mentioned before is the budget transfer process. So we implemented the budget transfer process where there's certain thresholds, and if it's above certain thresholds, then we can do it internally or we need to come to council for approval. And so we're going to be updating you on that as well going forward. And even though we're going to be giving you an update in April or March, we also want to give a mid-year update after the audit's completed, so we know exactly where we ended the previous year. And kind of like you've already seen this year, we're going to be bringing appropriations throughout the year to council for approval on things that might come up during the year that we didn't anticipate, or maybe a change in a project that was budgeted previously. We wanted to reallocate that. We've seen a couple of those already this year. And then something new that we've kind of done a survey, and I've seen that other jurisdictions do, and I just think it's beneficial for council, is at the first quarter of each year, we're going to be providing a list of purchase orders that are still open related to any projects within the city, just so that you will have the information as a council, and we're also going to reappropriate that and just make it a formal process.
Before you turn the page, Tiffany, on this to formalize this update to council on the fund balance, that will allow us as well to keep a pulse on what's happening with sales taxes as well.
Yes.
Which we have some question marks on.
Yes.
If I may, I'd like to also update our five-year fiscally constrained plan, so you can kind of see how that might affect our estimates looking forward. I think what's a little bit different here that we're suggesting is that after the year is in, and we've gone through the audit, it's an opportunity for council to kind of see where we're at financially. If there are appropriations for projects or programs you want to make at that time, fine. Historically, what we've done is we've just taken any excess that we have and just roll it into the fund balance and then deal with it basically this time of the year. But I think it's a good way for us to keep the council informed about our financial projections here, more than simply just once a year.
So those are just some changes that we're going to have going forward for the 2018 budget and after that. What I want to talk about a little bit now is the future of the economy and Littleton itself. So I'm sure all of you have heard that the U.S. economy is growing at a modest pace. There's some concern about the changes in retail. We have the online services that are now getting larger and taking up more of the retail sales. So we're really watching that. And I will say in Littleton, we're kind of fortunate in that we don't have very many big boxes when it comes to the online retail sales. We don't have a Walmart, we don't have a Target. And so people who may have been shopping at Target or Walmart in a physical location, they're buying online. That might not affect Littleton as much as some other jurisdictions. But we definitely are seeing some impact from that. The other thing that we're seeing is that because people are buying online, Amazon and some of the larger companies are now collecting sales tax on the city's behalf. And so we are seeing some revenues come in from that. That being said, you'll note that I've projected about a moderate increase in sales and use tax of about 2.7% over the next 5 years. And if you want to kind of relate that to CPI, CPI has been averaging about 2.5. I think it's coming in about 2.77 this next year. So it is a little bit less than where it's probably going to be coming in the future years. So we just want to watch that. We want to make sure that we're getting all the sales tax we can. We're auditing businesses as needed, just to make sure that we're getting our retail sales tax in. That's the bulk of our revenues that come in for the general fund, and it's important to understand what our businesses are doing, how they're working in their businesses, how their sales are. We just kind of need to watch that because that is the majority of our revenue that comes in. We do have some new commercial and residential development that's going to be coming in. However, it is going to be modest compared to previous years. And with that, we also get some building use taxes. Now, general use and building use kind of work in tandem, and as you see growth coming in the city, you'll see these two revenues going up, but then they're going to taper off depending on the development in the city. The one thing that I did want to add is when we add this development to the city, we also get some future property tax revenues from that. So we are seeing a little bit of that in the last couple of years and probably for the next few years related to added tax rolls to the city. But I think it's important to understand too that our tax mill levy rate has been 6.662 since 1991. So we haven't increased that. The only increases we've been getting on property taxes are just assessed valuation increases or decreases in some years and new growth. The other thing, because we had an excess in 2016, it is related to TABOR, so we're going to have to be sure and monitor our TABOR limits in the next few years and after that. We've kind of looked at that. I did a projection on 2017 budget, and we have a little bit of cushion right now, but that can certainly change at any moment if we have a large revenue source come in that we weren't anticipating.
I might add, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to go back to one comment on the prior slide with relative to property taxes, Tiffany. There's been some jurisdictions that have done some things with regard the split between commercial and residential. Do we match up roughly 50-50 or 45-55? What's that range that we're in, and how do we get impacted by Galler?
So I did go back and check because I think this was a question last time. We're about 55 residential, 45 commercial. And so as the residential rate changes, we're about 50-50 whether it goes up or down. So we're not as impacted as some of the other jurisdictions. Let's say the Littleton Fire Protection District. I want to say they're about 95% residential. Don't quote me on that. I'm not really sure on the percentages, but they're probably about 95% residential. So as that rate goes down, it really is going to have an impact on them. We weren't as impacted as originally thought for that.
And that's by revenue?
What's that?
That's by percentage of revenue for the total property tax?
Yes.
55% of the $9 million, or whatever the figure is commercial?
Is residential. 55 is residential.
55 is residential, 45 is commercial. Okay.
The other thing I just want to comment on briefly here is when Tiffany talks about the future commercial and residential development will be modest, we've had a fair amount of conversation internally about what that means. And, we have the Littleton Village commercial section, which, we've been hoping would develop perhaps faster than it is. But that is largely, one of the major pieces yet undeveloped. Obviously, Santa Fe Park off of Santa Fe, South of Mineral is another piece. That is really in the early stages here. Whether or not that project moves forward, we're not quite sure at this point in time or to what extent over time, but we have assumed, I would say, a fairly modest amount of development activity over here. After those two large parcels, then obviously a lot of what we're going to see in the future is going to be redevelopment, basically existing properties that will have to remove structures and start over. So that's why I think we're a little cautious in trying to overestimate, or at least look at the trend for the last couple of years and expect it to continue at that level. So we're a little more conservative than the last couple of years.
I'm just going to quickly go over the general fund. So for the 2018 budget, our revenues are projected to be about $64 million and our expenditures are $63 million. We're tasked to ensure that our revenues are more than our expenditures, and we have done so for 2018. Again, I like to put emphasis on sales and use tax just because it's such a high percentage of our revenues and it fluctuates. 52% of our revenues come from sales and use tax, and that includes retail, general use, and then motor vehicle specific ownership and cigarette taxes. Property taxes are going up pretty significantly in 2018. It's about a 17% increase. That's the highest we've seen probably since 1991 at least, or ever. And that's just because of the housing market. Next year will probably be a little bit flat. The year after that, I'm actually thinking that it might go down a little bit. We don't know how long the housing market's going to sustain the rates that it's at today. So I'm very conservative in 2020 when it comes to the property taxes. There's also the possibility that the RAR rate could be adjusted again, which could impact a lot of entities. 26% of our reimbursements or revenues come from the fire through service contract reimbursements, and then the remaining are just miscellaneous interest and things like that. We talk a lot about being a service provider as a city government. 77% of our expenditures are related to personnel costs because we do provide a lot of services for our citizens. 22% is operating and maintenance, which could be property or professional and consulting, office supplies, travel and training, things like that. And then less than 1% is related to transfers to other funds. I'm going to keep talking about the capital projects fund. Again, two major sources, HETF and building use tax. Building use tax, like I said earlier, is highly volatile depending on the development in the city. I'm projecting about $1.5 million each year for the next 5 years. It could be less, it could be more, so we're definitely going to have to watch that. We have the impact fees now. They're going to continue to accumulate revenues, and that's why we're doing a 5-year plan for impact fees so that we can be sure that we're using those impact fees accordingly. And then just a side note, fire contributions assist in funding fire equipment and apparatus out of capital projects fund. And then the graph just kind of shows you how volatile building use tax revenues are. Capital projects funds, our revenues are pretty slim, about $3.3 million, and our expenditures are about $7.4 million. So we're using about $4 million of fund balance in 2018. Like Mark said, we do have a fiscally constrained 5-year capital plan. I will let you know that beginning in 2019, there's going to be some reductions in a lot of capital asset requirements that we have, street maintenance, technology, and the fleet department. It's the only way that we're going to be able to meet our fiscally constrained 5-year plan. The revenue for capital, I kind of already talked about HETF and building use taxes, and then we get about 22% from interest or sale of capital. This next slide is just a graph of the funding that the fire partners contribute to the capital related to the fire department, be it vehicles or apparatus or equipment. Just kind of give you an idea of how much they're reimbursing us, about $300,000 with $600,000 in expenditures. This next graph is kind of a new graph. I don't believe you've seen this. What I kind of wanted to portray here is just to kind of let you know, we have a 5-year fiscally constrained capital projects fund. I know this says 6 years, but within 6 years, we're going to be spending about $40 million in capital improvements and infrastructure. It seems like a lot of money, but I want to let you know that about $11 million of that is coming from fund balance. So we're going to be depleting our fund balance in the capital projects fund by by the end of 2022. That's in the first column. The second column kind of shows you what our actual capital needs are today. So we're only spending about 40 million, but we really have needs of 55 million plus. And these are just things that we have identified currently and today. You can see for streets and infrastructure, we have the HUTF portion. That's the 1.4 million we have to spend every year from the state. It's the next line that you see here. We're spending only 3 million over the next 6 years. But if we want to maintain our streets and spend the $3 to $4 million that the Public Works Director is recommending, we would have to spend almost $14 million, and we just don't have funding for that currently. And that's what I just kind of wanted to show you the shortfall that we have in our capital projects funding.
If I may, just a couple of footnotes to add there. There's a couple of things, quite honestly, that's not even reflected in the 55 million. And really, that's the investment in our facilities, our buildings. We've talked at length about the service center in years past. It does not even include the $4.5 million that's been estimated here for the replacement of Building 2. We do not have a very extensive program here for maintaining a lot of the buildings. We're basically, in a large part, waiting until something breaks and then we fix it. You're going to hear a couple of those issues in the proposed budget that we just believe we just have to do. We've had a problem with the elevator over here. It's a new item. We'll talk more about that, but unfortunately, that's a facility we have to fix. So, just again, because we're fiscally constrained, we have no choice. But the investment we should be spending on our buildings is much more, than it's reflected here in that one line item of 2.2 million.
Yeah, and you can see over the next 6 years, we're only spending about $777,000 on building maintenance.
I'm sorry, once again, something else that's not reflected in there is whether or not the council wanted to pursue any kind of capacity improvements to our transportation system. So if you wanted to look at improvements to Santa Fe or Broadway, there are no funds for that. So we do not have anything in the budget strictly for those kind of purposes. This is basically trying to maintain the existing infrastructure that's reflected in that 55 million.
Mark?
Yes.
And earlier on, I believe you said that the amount that we have for capital improvements related to streets and infrastructure is less than what we need to keep it at a long-term level. In other words, if we were to present value the expenses over the longer term, this level of expenditure gets us behind that curve and causes us to actually have to spend more in the long run. Is that correct?
That's correct. So over the last couple of years, we've talked to the council at length about this, that, our time, we have a window here based on the condition of our existing pavement. If we move to a certain strategy where we're spending 3 to 4 million, we're able to kind of maintain that status quo. If we wait too much longer, and unfortunately this is what it's suggesting, is that we don't have the funds even to maintain, that the condition of the pavement will drop to the point where it becomes much more expensive. So that preservation strategy today, unfortunately, will not work in the future. And so I think that's our risk. Okay, I'm going to try to make a transition to something a little positive here. So,
Thank you, Mark.
yeah. And again, I think we are presenting to you, it is a pretty tight general fund, but it is sustainable. There's some sacrifices that are made here. We're going to talk more, certainly in the next couple of days about all that. But one of the things we are suggesting here is probably, in my opinion, probably two significant issues. First is the commitment to our existing staff with competitive wages and benefits. And that will be the first priority, or what's the word? Policy, thank you. Policy question that we're going to be posing here to the council. So that is definitely one of the commitments that we are suggesting here for this particular budget. And then we had a previous discussion here last year about the commitment here the council wanted to make here for our police department and the services that we provide. So this year is kind of fulfilling the balance of that commitment. So those are two pretty significant changes here that we are, or commitments I should say, that we're suggesting here for the 2018 budget. So with that, I think we're ready for the first policy question, or unless there's some questions.
Question. Back to the streets.
Yes.
So they're going to deteriorate. There must be an estimate of the impact on residential property values if that happens.
We have talked about that in the past. Council has raised that question. I do not have enough research to tell you how that would specifically affect us, but I would suggest to the council that is a real issue, that if we wait too long, the condition of the streets, I do personally believe, will start to have an effect on the value of the property. Now, I will tell you that based on our fiscally constrained budget, we're going to be focusing on the major routes. So I would suggest, if this projection doesn't change, quite honestly, our investment on our residential streets will be very, very little.
So we also have the sidewalks, and that was maybe more what we had talked about, the impact on the residential areas if the sidewalks deteriorate. So I think we need to really, if somebody can do any kind of somewhat grounded guesswork, that would be very helpful to council and to citizens.
I think it's a valid issue. I think that's something we, as staff, will look into. I will just make a clarification, the 1.4 million in HUTF funds we were talking about, that investment is for both the pavement and the concrete. So sidewalks, paving, curb and gutter, all of that has to be captured within the 1.4 million. So it's not even as promising as perhaps we described in the past.
I thought you were going somewhere positive.
I'm trying to find a different. But I think, you'll hear again through the next couple of days, and specifically Wednesday, about kind of a strategy and schedule for us that I've been suggesting to council about how we might tackle that here. And quite honestly, this is an issue that in my opinion, we're going to have to resolve in the first couple of quarters of next year in order for staff to really set a good direction here for the 2019 budget. Otherwise, we're going to be faced with the same challenge we're talking about this evening. If there are any other questions, maybe we could proceed to the first policy question. And I think, Julie, our acting HR director here, Julie's going to step up here along with Tiffany, I think, and kind of present this issue for council consideration.
Good evening, council.
Good evening, Julie.
So I'm coming here tonight to present our first policy question to you. We're asking the question if council supports a $1.2 million increase for employee compensation under the city's long-term total comp plan approved back in 2014. So it's important to note that that $1.2 million is inclusive of benefits and wages. This is a slightly smaller request from 2017's request due to savings in healthcare and dental insurance premiums. We have lower than expected medical claims this year and an estimated 6.6% decrease in 2018. So due to that, we are able to offer a premium relief for one paycheck. I think we're going to do the first paycheck in January. So neither the employees or the city is making a premium contribution. Factors that contributed to this decrease include increased use of the employee clinic, removal of prescription tiered copays, and Cigna Local Plus. As you know, we're currently in a very strong labor market here in Colorado, which is great for the state, but not so great for us as an employer. It's important for us to stay competitive, both with pay and benefits. The state of Colorado is currently at a record low unemployment, trending at the rate of 2.4%. That's actually the lowest it's been since January of 2001, just to kind of give you an idea of where we're at here. The national average is at 4.4%. We're competing against both the public sector and the private sector, as well as the record low unemployment. So again, it's important for us to stay competitive with wages and benefits. As the job market continues to increase, we see retirements, we see temporary and seasonal labor drop off, as well as the ever-changing labor market. And our turnover is affected at a higher and faster rate. For 2017, the city is trending towards a turnover rate of 15% versus a rate of 16.9% in 2016, 15.3% in 2015, and 10.2% in 2014. These numbers are reflective of a lower public sector turnover rate statewide. However, our goal, of course, is to keep City of Littleton's turnover rate at a minimum. Do you guys have any questions? Yes.
Julie, going back to the policy question that's there, you mentioned that this is a lower amount. However, you're saying it's consistent with 2014. And most of that driver is the lower medical claims that's coming through. Now, is the city taking all of that, or is it being shared with the employees?
Well, by doing the premium relief, we are sharing it with the employees. So the employees who participate in the insurance will not be paying a premium for one paycheck for health and dental.
So even though there's lower claim costs, we're somehow splitting that between the city and the employees?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And am I reading this right, that we have no deductibles for medical expenses?
That's correct.
For both prescriptions and visits to the doctor?
Well, there's a copay. So if you go to like your GP, for example, it's like $20, I believe. If you go to a specialist, it can be $40 or $60 depending on what the specialist is. And that's, of course, staying in network with Cigna Local Plus.
Okay. If we're reducing health costs, why is not the city recouping that?
So we have, we don't want to bring the premiums down because nationwide health costs go about 8 to 10%. And we don't want to put ourselves in a bad position for the years to come. So we'd like to keep our premiums where they're at so that we don't have to take a huge increase further down the road.
And if I can just add, I think maybe what you're asking is the city taking a credit as well for the health premium or lowering the city's costs?
No, it sounds to me like what happened was we had lower than expected healthcare costs. And so therefore we're taking part of those savings and dispersing it to the employees and taking the other half and putting it in the city funds.
Yeah, so what it essentially does is it saves funds all across. It saves expenditures across all funds depending on what fund the employee is paid out of. So we're reducing the employee's portion and we're also reducing the city's portion. So we're not going to be putting as much money into the health fund because the fund balance is pretty healthy right now. And so we're going to kind of buy down that fund balance in the health fund. And we're going to give a credit to the employees as well as the city.
As opposed to reducing the amount that we took out of all the funds that contribute to that.
No, it'll be across all funds that contributed.
I'm talking about the 1 month. How much money are we talking about?
I believe the city's portion is 100 and, Arlene, help me.
Yep.
I think it was about $120,000 for the city's portion.
So
And it's just for one paycheck, not for
One
one
pay
month.
period, right.
So we've got a $250,000 savings, but then we're taking $125,000 of that and giving it to the employees.
No, not $120,000. It's only the portion that they pay. So if, let's say the city pays 82% of the premium and the employee pays 17%, they're getting 17% of the savings.
Which is like what?
It depends on what plan they're on.
Like if it's employee only or employee plus spouse, family. I can get exact numbers for you guys.
Yeah, I think,
Am I not
so
understanding?
the $250,000, I guess I'm looking at how much is going to the employees and how much is going to the city.
The employees they're not getting something, they're just not having to pay premiums for one paycheck. So if you pay, and I'm just throwing out a number, but say you pay $20 for premiums on each paycheck. You just don't have to pay that $20 for one paycheck.
Okay, so we have a terminology disagreement, but
Sure.
we're still talking dollars.
Yeah, yes.
And I would say 17 to 20% possibly is probably a good estimate.
Of the 250,000.
I'm sorry, what's the 250?
I thought that's what you said the savings was. Or was that just
120.
pick a figure?
And the city's.
I'll tell you what, how about you give us a memo on this for tomorrow?
Okay.
Yeah, we'll work on it.
Okay.
That's fair.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, I'm just not seeing the 250,000.
That's okay, I might have written it down wrong.
So I'll ask
Town
you
council.
another question. So is there any incentive, intended or otherwise, for people to not stay home when they're sick or not go to the doctor when they're sick so that they would get a little more money? I mean, having worked someplace for 1,000,000 years, there were people who didn't want to lose any sick days because when they finally retired, they'd be able, at least at that time, I don't think they can anymore, but they could get paid for these days.
We don't pay out sick time upon separation from the city.
Questions from council? So we would like to move past question number 1, so this is the opportunity to ask any questions. Councilmember Clark's asking for clarification on the medical benefits and the compensation and the one holiday month and where that money comes from and et cetera.
Now I'm going to regret asking for this, but you did the study in 2014 about compensation and things like this. Can we get some information on that? Because I wasn't here in 2014, so when you're talking about a comparison and that we're implementing a 5-year program to bring us up to date, I don't know what the up-to-date,
I see. Okay.
what the details are.
Sure, we can provide that information.
Additional questions or comments from the council? At this point, then, we have additional information we're requesting, but I'm not hearing any objections to moving forward. Still hearing a consensus to move forward with this policy question. At this point, is that fair? Or trying to get the read of how council wants to go forward when we get a request for clarifications, et cetera, whether that's going to be the bump in the road, we wait, or whether we proceed past it, get the information, and go back if it changes minds, or how would council like to proceed with that? I'm most comfortable moving ahead, and then if it doesn't make sense, we readdress it again before Wednesday.
Concur. That's fair.
I agree.
So we'll look at this again, and unless there's something that really doesn't fit for us, we're moving ahead. And that's based on 2 questions that we've got, which are good. Next one. City Council.
Let's see, I'm just going to share a couple of highlights here. In your budget document, you should have, let's see, pages 46 specifically is the line item. A couple of highlights here. There really isn't a lot of significant changes, but we did make, we moved the audit services here, what is that, $34,000 from the city council budget to basically the finance department. So you'll see that reduction. And then we've taken the learning.
That's not in our charter that we paid them out?
Well, it's,
Something in the
the
charter.
city pays for it, it's just that it did in your budget.
I would prefer to leave it in the council budget.
Okay.
I mean, the auditor, in theory, is selected by us. Part of the reason why we do an audit is to make sure that everything's okay. I'd like to be clear to the auditors also who's auditing for it.
I'm fine with moving it. I think the auditor knows who he's working for.
So right now, it's
Is he
professional
here?
consulting, 34,000, is that?
That's correct. That's the number.
In 2018, it's actually going to be 42,000, just because the city's probably going to be subject to a single audit in 2018, so there's an additional audit cost related to that.
And can you clarify what a single audit is?
Single audit is it's a required audit on mostly internal controls for any municipality or organization that receives more than $750,000 of federal funds in 1 year. We haven't been subject to that, but we likely will in 2017 for the 2017 ending year.
So we're talking 7431, right?
7430? Oh,
7431 on
Yes.
46.
Correct.
Which, so it's a separate line item from the professional consultant.
Yes.
yeah, I'm mistaken.
That's okay. I just,
I didn't read correctly. So, the question was removing it from this line and placing it into a finance line, and the point raised is, it's really our audit, should it remain in our budget? And I'm hearing different opinions. Councilman Rickman's fine with leaving it.
I'm fine with leaving it. I don't see any.
I'm fine with leaving it.
Leaving it in our budget.
Yeah, I'm fine with leaving it in our budget. Yes, that's what I would prefer to do. So, and you're okay with me here?
Yes,
Leave it in our budget?
yes, leave it in our budget.
Okay, so we're good. Just leave it in our budget. Don't confuse finance with that.
And
That doesn't change the total, Tiffany.
no, it doesn't.
No,
Sorry.
it doesn't, we don't save any money. It's just where it's positioned. It's fine, no problem. Yeah,
Right pocket or left pocket.
yeah,
I'll just
Just want
add,
to make sure.
yeah.
2017 will be the last year with Anton Collins Mitchell, so we'll be going out for an RFP for the 2018 fiscal year, just so you know.
Okay, Tiffany, is that a 3-year rotation or a 5-year?
It's a 5-year by city charter.
Okay, thank you.
so when the selection process starts, I'm assuming you're going to come to council and we're going to figure out how we want to select the auditor.
Right. Typically, we do an RFP process just to get interested audit firms, and then I believe we had some council members that were appointed to a board, if you will, to look at the resumes and the RFP packages to make a recommendation.
We did. We made a recommendation to finance. You also, as staff, had a feeling for who you were most comfortable with, and I think we negotiated any concerns that we had and came up with the company we came up with.
The other significant budget highlight I might point out is that your learning and education in the council budget, we did reduce that to match more closely with what historically you've been spending on that. So we did reduce that by 8,000. So like all the other departments, we look at your actual expenditures before we set the budget. So that's the other highlight. Other than that, it's pretty modest things, nothing really of significance unless you have some questions. That would be the city council budget.
So
Yes.
potentially there'll be a few different people on council, and they may need some training or want to go to some things that some council members have not gone to as much recently because maybe they felt the need, right? So I'm not sure.
I agree. I think that, I mean, if you wanted to cut it in half, but to take the full to take 8,000, maybe. What is the budget for the?
We're looking at 25,000 in total for the 2018 year.
For the educational?
Yes, just for that line item, yes.
And that includes travel and everything else that's included with that?
Yeah, it covers everything with that.
You get the number,
Yeah.
the count,
174.50.
7450. Yeah, we tried to make it
It's
estimate
valuable.
staff about what council may want, obviously, so.
It's not a big number in a $65 million budget. I think it's nice to be able to have that in the event that people want to go to things. And also consider the fact that some of these educational opportunities come out every couple of years as opposed to every year. So while one year may be a little low, it doesn't mean that would be an indication of what's available the next year.
We've talked several times about better familiarization programs for new council members and actually refreshers for existing ones. Is that built in here? We've talked about doing that. A lot of that can be in-house, but is a provision in here to make sure that everybody's on the same page as far as what's...
Yes. Yeah, we are definitely stepping up a program here for council orientation. We've been having that discussion internally. We're looking at largely internal or other organizations like CML or CIRSA or others kind of coming in depending on the topic. But we are going to be putting together a program here for any new council member to try to get them oriented here for their new roles. And that's something obviously I'm not aware of what we did here in years past, but we recognize that's definitely something we have to address.
I think the CML, what CML does is really important to have people in on that and hopefully go to the conference at least the first year their council. I mean, if they can, because it's such an important understanding of what culture does and why.
So the feeling is we move the money back in?
Yeah, I would.
I agree with
Yes.
I do, and I just want to say that some of it's the presentation in the class, and some of it's the networking. But it's the only way we as council people can learn about ideas and learn how to do things. And I really do firmly support the idea you go to training with other people from other communities, however that's presented. It just really pays off at school.
Okay, be happy to. By the way, I've been asked for all of us to raise our voices a little bit, just to make sure that the system here picks up the conversation.
Thank you.
So are we mumbling?
Moving ahead then, out of city council, move to city attorney. Ready to do that? Okay. Remember, we can go back to some of these if we need to go back to them.
Absolutely.
So, city attorney, sir.
Thank you. I have the second policy question, which would be to adjust the assistant city attorney position from a half-time to a full-time FTE. And part of the purpose of this is first, I really want to move and minimize the extent we're using outside counsel. We need to use outside counsel, we should, but it's a far more efficient way of using resources to use a person like the assistant city attorney who's familiar, who isn't having to always prep for something when you're on the outside. And I've been on both sides of this. When you're on the outside, you're not there all the time. You don't have all of the same background as a person who's representing that board on an ongoing basis. Secondly, with the sheer volume of things that we're trying to do, such as we're working with staff departments on a series of changes to the zoning code, to the subdivision code. We're looking at all of the personnel policies and bringing those up to date. The fact of the matter is that quite honestly, there's more work than just the city attorney can do. As talented as I might be, there's far more work than I am able to get done. The idea here is this is a better use of resources than bringing in outside counsel and using outside counsel who charges a far more higher hourly rate than what we pay the in-house assistant city attorney. And I've outlined in the background for the policy question the various reasons for that. We have a very, very good assistant city attorney that I'm working on mentoring and developing, and I think this is the best use of your dollars is, in my judgment, to do this. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mine's kind of a negative question. So Steve, it's just to make sure, this is not asking for any change in what we do with regard to prosecutors?
No. Right now, the prosecutor is a contract position. It's my intent to keep that a contract position for the foreseeable future. Honestly, with a 2-day-a-week court, I do not see a full-time prosecutor as a efficient use of city resources. When we have court 2 days a week and then we may have trials the third day, to have a 5-day-a-week prosecutor, I don't think at this point in time with the caseload in the court that we have. In the court, it isn't that the court has more than enough time to do what it's doing. It's just that we don't have the caseload that would warrant, I think, a full-time employed prosecutor. If and when we did, I'd be telling you.
Do we know what, I would assume we're seeing a savings by having, by not contracting our city with the Fellman Group. So is it kind of a net by moving her to a full-time position?
I think there actually will be some savings, simply because we won't be using, I won't need to be using either Mr. Feldman or one of his associates to cover things. And quite honestly, their hourly rate has to build in all of the costs necessary to run a law firm. So this, I think, is certainly a more efficient way. I think the world of Mr. Feldman and his firm, they're very, very good. But I want to make sure we're using our resources in the best way possible.
Well, that's why we hire a city attorney, because we recognize that too. But I think that when like with the use of Fellman's group, he had assistants that were working on that too. So there was probably more employee power there than there is with you and a half time. So I'm actually defending your position. So supporting it.
And who else supports the city attorney's position?
Well, I have a question for you, because in the 2017 final budget, you've got 260 grand for regular salaries plus 230 roughly for contract attorneys, and in the 2018 proposed, you've got 320 regular salary and 90 contract. So those add up to 490 and 409. So we save $81,000 by.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
By going part-time and diminishing the contract. Is that?
Well, you need to.
Are we?
The
Are we
salary
getting into-
side, the finance department
this-
did that for me, so I'm going to get Tiffany address.
But that doesn't include Benny's.
It does include Benny's. However, you also have to add the $60,000 for personnel changes on line item 6199. That is actually the additional cost for the part-time employee going to full-time.
But getting back to Deb's point, there's actually a net savings.
Okay.
Over what the actual costs are right now.
So if it was 81 and you take out the 60, we're at 21.
Right.
Why do we call it personnel changes instead of cost?
That's just a way, when we're gathering the information for the budget, it's an easier way for the departments to put in one line for all of any personnel changes they plan to have. It's more of an accounting thing for us.
Wow.
It's more so that when council's looking at a policy question like this one, they can see exactly where that money is at in the budget, instead of us breaking it out between salary and all the different benefits, and then you have to get out your calculator and try to add it up and make sure our math is right. It's just an easier way for you guys to identify that cost.
Okay.
Plus, I'm assuming the salary on the top line doesn't include this additional personnel cost yet.
Correct.
So,
Yeah.
that's good, and you do that with the police too, right?
Yes.
So additional support for the city attorney's position?
Yes.
It's okay?
I suppose she's going to want a bigger office too.
Yeah. Out of the closet.
We didn't add costs for that, so.
If I could take, counsel, just for a second, would you tell us where you're at with your becoming qualified?
Yeah.
Yes, everything has been filed with the Supreme Court of Colorado. They assign you a person to work with you. I've been admitted to the U.S. District Court here in Colorado, and I am scheduled to take the multi-state professional responsibility exam on November 4th, which is a requirement in Colorado if you've not taken it in the last 5 years. And then the Supreme Court goes through all of the material I've submitted. And if there's anything that they have questions about, they get back with you. It has been a very interesting process. Everything from writing a letter of explanation as to any lawsuit you've been in and what did you learn from it. So quite honestly, I got to write about what did I learn from being divorced. And I hope I satisfy the Supreme Court.
I'm sure they'll read every word.
I certainly will.
Thank you. City manager.
Well, I think we do not have any policy questions specific to this, but one of the budget highlights here, make sure council is aware, I have included $100,000 in the city manager's budget to pursue the vision to comp plan to code update here for 2018. So that is in the city manager's budget. It's reflected in 7430 under professional consulting. The total for that line item is $145,000. So the 45 is additional costs that we've incurred for surveys and the like, if I remember correctly. So that's historically like the business survey and the citizen survey. What are we doing next year, by the way? Kelly, which one are we doing in 2018? Business? Oh, both. Okay.
So we're going to buy a vision for $100,000?
For 2018, that's the beginning. So, yes, as a placeholder, so once we set the scope, then we'll have a better idea how this will play out in future years. But $100,000 is the cost that we've allocated for 2018 to begin that process.
Explain what we're paying, what we're buying.
Well, we're going to have more discussion here probably in the first part of next year to define the scope. So the end of this month, you're going to have Golden come to you and share their experience about vision, updating their comp plan all the way through the codes.
And that's free.
That's free. Yes, that is free. That's the good news.
By our neighbors.
Yes. So we're going to learn from their experience. The intent is for us, based on the conversation that we have with council here, is if you're comfortable with that, we're going to come back with basically kind of a scope of how we might approach that. And we'll probably do that in the first quarter of next year. But this is in the budget trying to have a placeholder, so once the council is comfortable with that, then we'll actually pursue that through an RFP and a competitive process.
I still don't know what we're spending $100,000 on.
Well, let's see.
Here's where I'm at. If this is about rewriting the code and all of these things that we are supposed to have been doing and we know we need to do, if a consultant needs to be hired to help rewrite the code, we already have a consultant that we've hired to help with that. Is that coming out of your budget, or didn't that used to come out of city or community development?
Fair question.
Are we going to continue with that person? Are they in a different budget? If they're in a different budget, then what is this? Are they coming over? I don't know what that is a lot of money.
Correct.
That's a couple streets.
In fact, that is probably not enough to get this to the very end. This is a 3 to 4 year process to actually pursue a vision, to updating the comp plan, and then implementing all the code changes relative to that.
Why don't we hire someone?
Well, I think we're going to evaluate those options. We're just not prepared to tell you exactly what that will look like until we have probably more discussion internally and then with council about what that scope could be. So this is just basically a placeholder to accomplish that beginning in 2018. Now, there are other code updates. We have on the council's tentative calendar here, I believe in October, we're going to be coming to you to describe not only this process here, but also the series of code amendments that we're going to have to be pursuing, what we call our top 10 list, even though there's far more than 10. But it's a way for us to kind of manage some of these code issues here in the short term while we pursue this longer range challenge. In the end, the intent is once you go through the vision to comp plan to code, we'll have to reconcile, of course, everything that we've done here for the next couple of years. And I'll give you some examples of the top 10 list. We have open space, landscaping requirements. That's been consistently an issue that's popped up here in the code. We also have stormwater We have transportation engineering design standards that don't exist. So there's a series of things we'll be presenting to council here that we're going to be pursuing over the next year or longer, is in order to kind of address the immediate need while we still pursue the longer term issue.
So let me,
Still don't know what we're spending $100,000. Is that for a person? Is that for a bunch of consultants? Is that for a bunch of reports? What is it for?
I can't tell you what the outcome of that is yet because we have not set the scope of that. This is simply just a placeholder to begin that work.
Mark, I'm going to go back to what we did south of county line and the day we went through, and I think that was June-ish or something like that earlier this year. And we were with Kevin. And we spent a long time talking about visioning and getting a robust engagement with citizens. This is kind of the placeholder for that.
That's correct. Yeah, the voice of the community. That came out of your retreat. And so that voice of the community, gaining that input, this is a way to capture all that into a process that ultimately allows us to formally set the vision, formally pursue an update to our comp plan. Remember, we're officially running on a comp plan from the 80s. Okay? And then we've talked about trying to address the code, but the typical planning process for all cities, most cities, is vision to comp plan, then to code. For us to jump in and fix the code without addressing the other two, quite honestly, I think is irresponsible.
But it's getting the citizens to come out and participate.
That's what it's about.
So maybe sending the police to their house to pick them up and bring them to the meeting.
That's our challenge. And,
Or whenever you're late.
So, so to move along, go ahead.
so I don't know where I've been the last several years, but it seemed to me we had a pretty rigorous comp plan update. We said we were going to do certain things. Then a few things happened and we were treading water while we were doing something else. But if we just did what we said we were going to do in the last comp plan, we'd probably take care of a hell of a lot of stuff. And I don't mean that to be quite as feisty as I'm sounding, but it just seems that we're all the time getting ideas and planning and visioning and doing whatever, but we don't get it done.
I would agree. In fact, I'm suggesting to you we need to break that pattern. I see us having a history here of doing pieces of the work, but we have never woven them together to get to the end. And so we have failed, in my opinion. So when we pursue some of these things, there's no way for us to consistently go from the vision, formally updating the comprehensive plan, formally updating the codes as a very succinct pattern or process. We haven't done it.
I don't know if that's because we haven't paid $100,000 for a visioning consultant, or if it's because when it gets in front of council, council decides to kill it. We had a streetscape plan that we had a whole bunch of, that was a visioning plan, and that thing got killed because someone had an issue with the way that the process went. It wasn't bid out, although there's arguments as to whether it was done properly or not. I mean, I guess I'm somewhat with Peggy is, if $100,000 is going to make it happen, then that's different. But if $100,000 is just going to continue the conversation, I'm tired of talking. We've got a budget that's not moving. We've got a crisis for the first and second quarters to deal with, and I've been screaming visioning since I've sat on council and trying to get that moved. But at this point, we have a wildfire burning, and we want to talk about how we want to redevelop on the other side of the hill. I don't know that this is. I'm not comfortable with this right now based on what our budget looks like. And I'm not comfortable not knowing enough about what this really is. I don't want to spend $100,000 on Kevin. I love Kevin.
No, this is not Kevin.
But I know, but I'm saying that hypothetically.
This is the execution of the priorities you set. That was the intent of this, that you said in your council priorities. But if you're not comfortable.
But what does that, Mark, it doesn't, if it's the execution of the priorities we set, I need that broken out. I need you to tell me more about what that, I can't do a placeholder for $100,000 in this budget.
I would say, I would give Mark a little bit of patience and a little bit of rope on this, because I think we have a lot of plans that were conceived at different times. They don't necessarily dovetail. We've been trying to get this together with what our citizens want to have, and we've had a little bit of fractured things in terms of Santa Fe versus Broadway versus Bellevue versus Littleton Boulevard versus all these, and that visioning part, I think, needs to come together. If Mark fleshes this out a little bit and can't justify to council how that $100,000 would result in a better future for Littleton, then, gee, we have $100,000 that we have not yet approved on specific expenditures. So let's see what can be done with it. I mean, we hired Mark to do this stuff. Let's let him do it and get to the point where we have a specific proposal so that we can decide how we want to take this forward. We ask him to do this, and this is a number.
Yeah, I'm gonna vehemently agree with where Bill is talking about. We spent time talking about how to get the voice of Littleton, how to get the voice of the community, and what this is to do that. I'm convinced at this point in time to get to a comprehensive plan that actually has the depth where we can move from that comprehensive plan to a mobility transportation plan, to a housing plan, to deal with a number of the issues that we don't have the foundation to move to actually get to those points, and those are very important to us, and they were all on that priority list that we talked about. This is a step in that direction to get that engagement with the community so that folks actually understand the opportunity, and we're getting that vision of the future that is not just 7 individuals.
Well done. This would enable us to bring together the pieces of revenue and expense that are necessary to the long-term financial visioning that really make the city work over the long term. This is a long-term project that enables the citizens to say, here's where we want to have our priorities, and really bring that all together into one place. We've been working off fractured little islands. I feel like a polar bear looking for a seal with global warming. Is that how's that?
And maybe you can find an ice cube,
we need to bring it all
This
together.
doesn't say
We have a
that
yes, we have a no, we have a yes. What's yours?
So,
We have a yes, and we feel.
So I'm no. And if I can clarify this, we had 3 committees appointed, what, year and a half, 2 years ago, the housing and so forth, so on. They went out, they did some work, and they're still working.
you had one committee.
One committee did their job.
When
Met.
a couple of them did things and didn't do too much, but the point is, and we also had outreach meetings with citizens, one at the library, the museum, 2 months ago, whatever, getting input from people, telling us certain things. We keep approaching, and then we back up a half a mile or so. It seems to me there's something we could do with $100,000 that would make a noticeable difference in something in this city that would help be a catalyst for private investment. I mean, I'm really frustrated with this, I'm sorry.
I think you just agreed with Phil.
So,
Well, look,
You're looking for the future.
I do
I'm going to tell you
agree.
that my vote's a 4, it gives you the 4. So we're going to.
So what clear on your vote? Which one?
I would vote in favor of including this in the computer, or in the budget on a line for us to see. But the manager's going to have to come back with.
It's not appropriated. It's budgeted, but not yet appropriated.
He's going to have to come back and he's going to have to talk about how he would like to spend it and how it looks out, and RFP process and all that. So we've done this in the past. In the old days, we called them plug numbers. Put a number in there so that you have some space to work and then come back and account for it.
If I may, I would suggest that we put it in the budget, it's appropriated, but there's a budget proviso to it. It's a very formal declaration on the part of council where you do not want us to expend any funds until you approve the RFP. So I think that's fair. That was clearly what was intended here from the staff perspective. In order for us to kind of pursue your council priority here, this is the concept that we came up with. Obviously, you know, this is going to need some more time. I think the discussion with Golden is your opportunity to kind of see what they did. Not that we have to do exactly what they pursued, but it's an opportunity for you to hear from another city who's done the beginning clear to the end of how we get to this thing. That's the hope.
And I don't have a problem, I mean, I don't disagree with the intent of what both Bill and Phil said. My biggest issue with it is I've sat here for 10 years and watched this not happen. And everybody always says, we're gonna do it. We hire consultants and we do, and then nothing. And we're sitting here again, nothing, and there's $10,000 or $100,000 in a tight budget. All I'm saying is, that needs to produce $1 million worth of value for us. Because we can't keep doing this.
I agree.
I mean, you hand us a budget that's like D-Day budget. You know, it'd be great if we were sitting here, woo, what are we going to do with this? Oh, it's more money. We're not. So this, to me, I mean, this is why this stuff is so, that's why I get so fired up about it, because we can't keep kicking it around. And if you need $100,000 to make it happen, I'm just saying it better happen.
In my opinion, and I've shared this with all the council before, of all the issues that we've got in the city, to me, this is the most important, is to get the vision, the comp plan, the code. And I would agree, we have had a pattern of us not accomplishing this feat. This is what, personally, what I want to execute. I believe that this is absolutely necessary for our community. Without it, we're going to continue to struggle and have these very diverse conversations, and at times they're going to be very argumentative because they're not united to a vision, to comp plan, to code. That's our struggle here. We must break that. It takes political commitment to get from the beginning clear to the end. Agreed?
This is the hard work and actually the rewarding work of council is that straight line thing that was working on visioning, future planning, financial sustainability, instead of all those exciting things like sewer plant agreements and how to, looking at the audits and all that. That doesn't take the amount of hard work and commitment to the future as what Mark is. So we've got the four, let's go.
The next one is communications and marketing. You also have additional.
I do not.
Okay.
Good job, Kevin.
Thank you. Can I be done now?
Yes.
May I be excused? We just have a budget highlight. I didn't write the more efficient management of resources. Thank you very much, Shirley, for writing it like that. But we did have an FTE in our department that really ran our print shop, and we had a vacancy at the very end of last year. So this position was budgeted for this year. And we decided to contract that out, and we have determined that we can fulfill all the service delivery that we need in the print shop with a person working 24 hours a week versus 40. So we're going to give back $29,240 and reduce this position to a part-time position. Other than that, I don't think there's a lot of real highlights in here except other equipment, that 19.5. 8,500 of that we're proposing to replace the big fill-in-the-blank tent. It's more than 10 years old. It's beginning to get rips in it from the creases, being folded up and stored over the winter in a duffel sack. So we're proposing to replace that with a light-colored tent that's white that we hope will be a little cooler on very hot days. And then we are also going to replace the large format printer. That's the big printer that these big color graphics that you see behind you. We can print that in-house here. It's very cost efficient for us. We print all those big things that you can't fit on a printer anywhere else in the city. We can print banners that are 30 feet long. We print the signs for liquor permits, the posting of property, the real large ones you see out on a piece of land or for land use change. So that is, we can't find any paperwork on it, but we think it's more than 15 years old. And it's starting to have some problems, so we proposed replacing that too, and that's used citywide. So That's about all I have, unless you have questions.
Do we have questions for Kelly? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, let me start with an apology. I used, my math was correct, but I used the wrong numbers. So if you've got an older version, not this particular slide, Erlene and I corrected that. So basically what we're saying is that our final budget last year was $685 and $20, and we think by year end we're going to be at $575, $520. So that's a little more than $100,000 saved. And then we were pretty conservative about how we were budgeting this year, and so we're going to be asking for $950 less than we did last year from budget to budget. So a couple of things just for you to know. We did include a new item. We have, I believe it's $1,800 in here for merchant signs. The city is the only entity that can do off-premise signage, so part of our promise to keep the wayfinding vital is that we do pay for the merchant blades, and they run $150 for both sides. So that's just a number if we end up replacing the number that we think we may, or adding new businesses on that. We have dramatically reduced over the last couple of years our database budget because we have plugged into our project management system how often we use these. So we keep track of our projects, and then we have a mandatory flag for what databases you use. And so at the end of each year, we count up the number of times that we've used a various database, and if it isn't high enough, then we no longer ask for money for that database. It's just not being used. So that's just been our basic way of managing our budget, is we take a look at what services we can provide just as staff members and how we can use the internet for research, where we used to pay for more expensive databases, and the ones that we are purchasing now are helping us with the attraction side of things.
Questions?
For clarification, it says the department completed 254 more business retention projects. Does that mean we retained that many, or you?
No, it means that we did work. We completed 254 more projects. So those, what projects can be, it's kind of a wide variety. It has to do with the amount of time that's spent on something, but it can be something where we've reached out to, say, a developer who's been interested in a piece of property. We give them a little more information if they want to continue to pursue it. Or it can be something more expanded, where we're working with a business that wants to improve their marketing. So we're taking a good look at their website and their social marketing, and then we're providing them with suggestions. So projects can mean a lot of different things, but we are managing to do more and more of them. We've kind of created templates for how we assess certain things when it comes to business retention projects, so it's a little bit easier for us to do more of them now.
So have you worked with anybody that said or was considering leaving, holding up shop, and wound up keeping them, or?
We don't have much attrition.
Well,
So-
I knew that from looking around, but I just didn't know how you assess effectiveness, because it's kind of a little bit like teaching class. Yeah, I taught class today, but sometimes it's hard to, yeah, did anybody learn anything? So any ways that you can gauge, not so we can fault you, just so we understand more?
We can look at any given period of time of businesses that have closed and what the reasons are. We work with finance on that, so when a business closes, then they reach out and find out what the reason is. Sometimes it's just they've closed. Other times maybe they've moved to a less expensive jurisdiction. But we could do more of a drill down on that if you wanted to. We're pretty fortunate in that most of the businesses that operate with a viable model are fairly well sustained around here. And what we do with them is kind of help them grow. So an example might be the company Adaptech that makes prosthetic devices, and then the puck device, we reach out to them periodically. So if they want to do another crowdfunding to advance that product, then we work with them on that.
Just a couple of questions, Denise. Just if maybe you could comment on your database of available spaces, if there's any, and then also what is maybe being done with regard anticipating issues with having a database of when commercial leases expire.
We have recently acquired CoStar, and we're upgrading that. It's a pretty robust real estate database. You're probably familiar with it. And it allows us to do everything from flag ourselves with an email when a property becomes available. We can take a look at who's leasing that property and what the terms of the lease are, so now we can reach out to a tenant if their lease is about to expire. We can get comps together. If somebody's interested in buying a property, then we can go out through CoStar and find comps that are available either for vacant land or building occupied land. So it gives us a lot more flexibility in terms of looking at what's available and what we can do with it, and outreach as well. The other piece that we have, we use a database called Sightseer. So if anyone is interested in a particular retailer, or we think a retailer is viable here, this allows us to go out to a city where they're succeeding and pull the statistics that are related to that. What does that population look like? What do those expenditures look like? And we can do a side-by-side comparison with where they're successful and float that up with the site selector.
Additional questions for Denise?
Denise, in looking at this, it looks like the difference between the 2017 final budget and 2018 proposed is roughly the $100,000 you talked about. Mm-hmm. But it looks like that's all in grants and incentives that went from 211 back down to 100, and 100 have been kind of the high standard before.
Right.
What was there a reason for the extra 100 last year?
Yes, and that's I'm glad you brought that up, because that is actually, for the most part, what that change is. We work with finance because these grant requests straddle more than 1 year to do POs to carry money over. So if we have an application that's in the approval process, then we are allowed to carry it over 1 year. And then we took a quick look at who was still asking, and then dove a little bit deeper and decided that certain projects were just not going to manifest, so we were going to return that money to the general fund. Any given year, though, you might see that there's a little more than $100,000 for grants because there might be a PO for a year where it has straddled more than 1 year.
So 100 is a realistic expectation for any given 12-month period?
Correct.
Thank you.
Additional questions for Denise? I don't see any. We've been at this for an hour and a half. How about we take a 5-minute break and we'll come back. return from our short break, and the next department up is Finance Department.
Finance.
Finance Director Hooton is here.
Shocking, right? Are you ready? All right, good evening, Council. The Finance Department does not have any policy questions for the 2018 budget. However, there's a couple of highlights that I'd just like to mention. The main one is you're going to see quite a large reduction in our 2018 budget as compared to the 2017 budget. And that's directly related to attrition through our department. We've had some significant changeover in this past year. And just based on the longevity of previous employees in those positions, there's a cost savings in 2018 of about $94,000. As far as the other budget line items, we already discussed the audit. We had moved that into the Finance Department, so we're going to be moving that back to the City Council. So that will increase our $30,000 reduction to about $72,000. The only line item that has kind of a significant change is professional consulting. And what that entails primarily are sales tax audits through our contracted company that does outside audits for us. We're going to probably increase those in 2018, and with that comes a cost. But I'll let you know, we spend about, for every $17, we get about $100 back when we final audit those. So there's definitely a revenue related to that expenditure.
Did you do a lot more?
You know, there is the...
Teasing. I mean, there must be some point at which then you say, whoops, we're doing too many, right?
Right. And I think we're just going to have to monitor that. We're going to have to watch that. We're doing some construction use audits right now, which we haven't really done a lot of those in the past, so that's part of this. And then a lot of building use audits or sales or use tax audits kind of relate to retail sales tax audits as well, so they kind of go one in hand. So we're kind of ramping up our use tax audits as well.
Tiffany, how are we staying in touch with this semi-legislative activity around uniform sales tax definitions?
So, great question. I'll kind of give you a highlight of that. I don't have the memo with me, but I did provide Mark with a memo a couple of weeks ago on the process for that for the city. We're very well aware of it. We've been to webinars. We've had discussions on it. We were kind of waiting to see what other cities, how they've gone through the process with their council. So I did write a memo to Mark indicating that you will probably be seeing something at the end of this year related to updating our sales tax definitions.
I believe I put it on or you put it on, actually, the council's tentative calendar here in the fall. I can't remember.
November, I believe the last week of November, there's a study session on it scheduled.
Yeah, okay.
And then first and second reading in December, I believe.
Since we're a home rule city, doesn't it seem that the state is looking to overstep its bounds?
Oh, are you kidding? Why would that ever happen? Where'd you get that idea? Silly
You know,
Phil.
I don't think this state is overstepping the boundaries. I think what the state is doing is they're giving the home rule, I know, they're giving the home rule cities the opportunity to make some changes to unify the sales tax definitions to help businesses. I think the largest complaint is that businesses don't know from one jurisdiction to another what's taxed in one versus the other. And if we have these uniform definitions, all businesses supposedly will know what the definition is, and then we as the home rule city have the ability to add exceptions to that or exemptions to that. And so it's going to put the exemptions all in one place, so businesses will have a better idea of what's taxed and what's not.
Okay, so the fact that we had a citizen vote that led to not taxing groceries or food elements part of groceries, where does something like that go in this context?
Right, so that would be under the exemption section. So we'll have an exemption section that lists everything that City of Littleton as a home rule municipality has exempted from tax. What you'll be seeing is you're going to be seeing a matrix. We're going to take our current definitions and we're going to compare them to the new definitions, because one thing that we're required to do is make sure that it's revenue neutral. And so we want to definitely make sure we're looking at our definitions in conjunction with the city attorney's office to make sure that's going to happen.
And that's required because of?
A TABOR. If we change a definition that could potentially make something taxable that previously wasn't, then it becomes a Tabor issue.
You know, that's barely a first step in fixing the issues. If you're an independent vendor in California or Wyoming or something, you're selling across the internet, it would probably be almost impossible for them to figure out what taxes to collect if they wanted to and sell it. We really need to go another step, and we probably need to band together with some other cities and make it much easier for them to be able to figure out the tax they need to collect and where to send it to. And I don't know if we want to do that through the state. Maybe what we need is...
CML's working on it. Are we working with CML?
We are, yes, we are.
CML's
Yeah.
laid a lot of groundwork on
Yeah,
this already.
this is kind
It's
of
a
like
national issue.
Yeah, this is kind of like the first step to uniforming the definitions, and then there's going to be more behind that, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, no need for the November discussion. We're having it now. But yeah, you're getting into the issues that we've talked about here, knowing that, you know, the council's gonna have a lot of opinions about this. But seriously, that was the intent of bringing it to you, is to have this kind of conversation.
So for the finance department, that is the main changes that we have from 2017 to 2018 budget.
So Tiffany, so we agreed as a council, we want to have our audit, which is the one that generates the CAFR, in our budget arena. In your budget arena, the single subject audit would stay with you in finance then?
No, the single audit will dovetail with yours.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
it's going to
that's
stay
what
with
we're
yours.
for that.
Yeah. And if we by chance don't meet the threshold, then we won't have to spend the additional money related to that.
Any other questions of finance?
I do want to put one little more plug. In the information I gave you, there was some information on online filing for our sales taxpayers. And I just kind of want to highlight that because I think it's really important to see our increase in our compliance with that. And I say compliance, but it's not required. But, you know, we really are encouraging our taxpayers to file online because they take a lot of time. We have one person who manually enters that. So by getting this online program, I'm hoping by next year we'll be at about 42% of our taxpayers filing online. We're always going to have the ones that don't want to, but for the most part, I mean, 38% is pretty good for 2016.
So do you give them opportunity to give feedback about the online process?
We do. There's an option. They have a comment option. They can email it, and it comes directly to our sales tax.
So potentially you can tweak to make it more user-friendly.
There's some things that we can't tweak just because it's the framework of the online system, but some other things we can definitely look at.
Tiffany, is there any reason we can't do sewer bills online too? Is that, I mean, that,
We actually do. We do allow for online payments for sewer payments.
but the billing as well, I mean.
The
that's-
billing
It's a
now,
lot of, who licks all those stamps?
we contract out, and I'm sure they're
Yeah.
very sore.
Some poor person.
Actually, on our bills, when we send it out, there's some information that if they want to get e-notices, they can get e-notice billings, so that way we will be able to email them a bill rather than mailing that. And that comes through a third party that does our sewer billing.
Additional questions from the finance director? That brings us to information services. And while Ken's coming up, there's a policy question that's listed here as policy question number 3, because it has to do with getting information, and his an information service, but it's really going to have more to do with sewer utility enterprise and that whole operation. So the city manager has it here because it impacts information services, but the slot itself is going to be in utilities. And so we want to wait and discuss it a bit.
Yeah, we're going to talk with council if this is okay, with Keith Reister, our acting public works director, and Ken Price, of course, talk a little bit more about kind of the strategy behind what Public Works wants to pursue here for asset management. This personnel request in the sewer fund is kind of tied to that, so it just seemed like more logical to have the sewer discussion with this tomorrow.
Okay. I do have a question. I'm assuming that the $77 grand would come out of the sewer fund to be transferred in the general fund. Is that
I'm sorry.
No, it'll be actually charged directly to the sewer fund, this personnel request.
Oh, the personnel request, yes. They're going to be an employee of the sewer fund, helping with the GIS mapping and things like that.
So that's the enterprise that you pay
Right.
for.
Out of the enterprise.
Okay,
it's
so
not
the
general.
salary will show up as a salary line item there,
In the
even though
sewer.
they're badged as.
Yeah.
Yes.
So am I correct, we actually end up splitting that with Englewood?
Pardon me?
Do we actually end up splitting that with Englewood then?
No, it's actually charged to the utility differently, so it's pulled out of that by city joint cost.
Okay.
And again, all great questions, that's why we just thought it'd be more logical to talk about how that affects the actual sewer utility and the cost.
Because Ken doesn't know about the utilities. He knows about the information services. I wish.
He knows about the GIS application.
He certainly knows about GIS.
Okay, Ken, it's all yours.
Thank you. So skipping ahead to budget highlights, really just have three things to mention. The first one being our software maintenance contracts, and you can see the line item there and the page that can be found on. Every year, for about the last 3 or 4 years, we have been looking at the software programs utilized by all the departments and trying to consolidate some of those maintenance costs in my budget. So part of this increase is due to our ongoing efforts around that. We added 3 additional software programs to my budget in the 2018 proposed budget. Other increases in this line item are due to the annual increases by our vendors. They increase their maintenance costs every year, so that's reflected in this line item. The second one is our telecommunication services costs. If council will recall, in December, you voted to approve a expansion of our master services agreement with Comcast. We were moving our iNet over into what's called Enterprise Network Services. And this is the reflected cost. If you remember, our costs were around $125,000 a year as a result of that transfer. So this increase of $40,000 to that line item is reflective of that cost increase regarding that transition. And the third line item is just our reoccurring capital costs for computer replacements, server replacements, and network equipment, and adding additional capacity to our storage systems.
Questions for Ken? Go ahead.
Is there any, you talked a few months ago about broadband and on Main Street such, as there, a lot of the cost for that is already in place. Is there any move in the budget to make that a reality?
That would, again, have to go to the voters in the city of Littleton to exempt us from this Senate bill. It's called Senate Bill 152. And we are talking about that. We don't know yet when we might come to you and ask for you to put that on the ballot, but we are working to that effort.
So that's at least 2 years away.
Well, we're going to have a discussion in the first half of next year. Council can decide when you think it's most appropriate, but we want to kind of follow up with the conversation we had earlier and see what your interest is in pursuing that. We will be looking at some ordinances here where we will look at co-locating additional conduit whenever we have a contractor doing work in a particular piece of right-of-way. So we don't have that in place. So there are some code issues that will kind of help set that up. But the real pursuit of whatever strategy is, I think I'll bring it back to council again sometime in the first half of next year for the council to decide how far you want to take it.
And just a comment to that, I think that's the kind of thing you could put in place that actually can help you enhance your revenues, because it enhances the environment wherever you have that. And people are more likely to enjoy what they're doing and spend more money, and it enhances their experience and enhances our revenue. So.
And we did talk about that economic advantage, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I have a question, Ken. I know you've we've gone from Microsoft to Google as far as Office support, and it's not without issues, but there was considerable savings when you went to Google. Is that still working for you? Any other issues going on there as things change?
It is. We have gone to a different licensing model in Google, so the savings aren't as much as they were initially, but we are still seeing some savings there compared to the Microsoft model, yes.
Other questions?
Cell phones. We have 454 cell phones the city has. Do we need to, just about everybody has a cell phone now. Does the city really need to be providing cell phones on a general basis? I realize that police are going to need to have a separate cell phone because, for security reasons, and there may be some other people that, why are we in this day and age?
The city attorney was in the room, but we have concerns around public record because when you use a personal cell phone for city business, that opens up the potential for a public record search of what calls you made on that personal cell phone. So many of us, me included, carry two. I actually have a personal cell phone and a city cell phone for that exact reason.
Hillary.
Pardon?
Hillary.
However, if I may add my 2 cents, I think I would like to explore what some other cities have done, and that is the use of a stipend. So instead of the city actually providing and purchasing a cell phone, they provide some kind of a stipend there to offset some of the costs. Now, you still have the access to public records that an employee would have to be aware of if they go down that route, but many cities have done that kind of approach there in order to kind of minimize, quite honestly, their cost in purchasing a lot of these cell phones. So that is something I would like to explore.
Well, we're not the only governmental entity that has, that's subject to open records and has employees. I mean, there's other governmental entities that employees use their own personal cell phones.
Yeah.
And they've made it work. Although I can understand very much the issue with that. I think it's worth some exploration.
I think it is. Yeah, I think we as staff, I know we've had a couple of conversations about it, but it is something I would like to pursue.
Is there some place in the budget where we see what all the cell phone costs are? Or is that still sprinkled throughout each of the departments?
Oh, that's in the telecom budget, so that would be on page 127. So that line item is all-inclusive of cell phone costs, as well as our long-distance bills, our local telephone bills, even our internet connectivity. This Comcast ENS is in that budget line item.
7470?
Yes, 674.70. I believe it's 410,000.
373 is what we're suggesting for 2018, I think.
What page are you on, Ken?
127.
It's under general operations.
Okay.
And I do have that number broken out in a spreadsheet, so if you really want to know what that specific number is, I can certainly provide it.
Yeah, I think that's something I would like to look at here next several months, is we'll evaluate that and talk with council about it. I've had a personal interest in trying to do something with that. I have other issues with just issuing so many cell phones. So.
And we do split that, just so that you know, with the fire partners. So this number is strictly the city.
Yeah, I don't know what other cities do, but I do know what a number of financial services securities firms do, which is provide an additional software security component. That's, if folks are going to use the stipend, they install this, and so it provides for additional security.
Hopefully it's not provided by Equifax.
It is not provided by Equifax.
Sorry.
The not secure credit.
But that's the kind of stuff I would like to evaluate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Flip phones.
Wow.
We're gonna go
Additional
back to
questions
bag phones.
for Director Price? Additional questions for Director Price?
I look forward to meeting with you, I guess, tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night, we'll talk detail about the sewer details.
Okay, this brings us to City Clerk.
Good evening, Council.
Nick Shannon.
Didn't really add too much to my budget this year. We are applying for a grant, and what this does in our courts is it allows us to electronically transfer DMV reports to the DMV. Right now, we have to write them out, we put them in a box, and then at the end of the day or whatever, we fold them all up and we send them, or we fax them. So what this does is, and the $8,000 is for our court software, which is GEMS, to make it possible to do this, to interface both of the two different pieces. So that's what the $8,000 is. But the DMV has grants, and they're full grants, and there's no matching on them, and they encouraged us to apply, and they actually helped Rachel fill out the application, and so I think they're having a hard time giving that money away. I'm not sure why, but so we're applying for that, and so it'll be a wash on those two. The 8,000 in for it and the 8,000 out. And then I added $500. I guess I should go back to the beginning of this. I was jumping forward. I moved the rentals. I took that out because it wasn't reflective of where we were spending the money, and moved it up to our office supplies. And then we are, okay, the $6,000 is for, we need to put a window up in the deputy city clerk's office, so that she meets with people in her office with sensitive material, with their liquor licenses and all of that, so that she can have a private place. It will not be closed all the time, but so that she can close the glass and close her door and have some privacy with citizens who come in and are working with her. So that's for that. And then, let's see. Professional services is the additional for our bailiff, and then the 4430, excuse me, is for the increase in the judge's salary that council approved in April.
Yes, this spring.
April, the spring. And so that's on that. And then I added $500 to the office supplies for omnibus and shopping cart. And that's it. Anybody have any questions?
Just a real quick one, Wendy, and it's actually looking for an activity that would be next year to submit grant requests, particularly in the area of senior and vulnerable population transportation and mobility. The Area Agency on Aging has a responsibility starting next year for an additional $1 million a year, so it's a 50% increase in the overall funding pool that they have, and that 50% is actually going all towards mobility and transportation in that area. And so money's there, and the priority is there from the region on that, and so it's a matter of submitting the grant request.
Unfortunately, right now at this time, we have almost, because of grants that we've done and the process that we had before, 3 years ago, something like that, and we paid rent on our buses into a fund. And so we were able to get new buses. So almost, I think all but one of our buses, it might be all of the buses, are relatively new, like 3?
This is operating costs. You can, these money, it's not just for vehicle acquisitions. It can actually be used for operating costs.
Yep.
And it can also be used not just for seniors. It can be used for those under 60 because it can also be applied
For
to
mentally
vulnerable population,
Okay.
including veterans, as well as seniors, as well as others.
Okay.
And so it has much less strings on it than it has in the past.
Okay. What's the last one we got? I promised Tiffany that, and myself that I would never get federal money again because it was such a nightmare. But if it's a little easier, I would love that.
Well, yeah, it has less strings, I'll put it that way.
Thank you.
Of course, that's not a...
Any other questions?
Additional questions from the city clerk? Thank you. Which brings us to human resources. And there's no policy questions.
So HR doesn't have any policy questions this year. Our budget really remained pretty status quo. We do, however, have one big thing I'd like to talk to you about, and then I'll turn it over to Tiffany to talk about property and liability. But we do have, you'll see the second bullet point is workers' comp claims paid for 2018 reflects an increase of $31,800. And that is in order to enroll in the voluntary firefighter cancer benefits program. So currently we're operating under the 2007 presumption of cancer legislation, in which it is up to the city to prove that the employee or former employee's cancer is not a direct result of their employment and the associated risk. For example, if John Doe makes a cancer claim, he does not receive an immediate workers' comp payout, as there's an invasive investigation that has to happen. The city and workers' comp attorney spends time researching prior exposures and investigating prior employment, family history, and medical records in order to make a determination. Therefore, the city ends up paying outside legal costs and for expert medical examinations. In this case, despite John Doe being an active employee or a retired employee. So to date, over the last 10 years since the presumption in 2007 was passed, the city has had 7 cancer claims, one of which is still open and not yet fully paid. The average of the closed claims is $68,388 per claim, making the estimated spend per year, once all claims are closed, $47,871 per year. So the Voluntary Firefighter Cancer Benefits Program is a multiple employer health trust to provide benefits to eligible firefighters by paying contributions into an established trust. An employer participating in the trust will be exempt from the presumption eligibility mandate for workers' comp for firefighters with certain types of cancers, meaning no investigation into the cause of cancer will be needed upon confirmation of eligibility. In order for a firefighter to be eligible for the trust, they must be a full-time firefighter for at least 5 years. While it would not make sense for a firefighter to still claim a workers' comp claim, by law they still maintain the right to file a claim. However, the burden of evidence is now on the firefighter to prove that the cancer was job-related. The Cancer Trust would offset workers' comp costs in the event a workers' comp claim was filed. The Cancer Trust provides for limited liability for former employees and is capped at 10 years. Currently, under the presumption, it would apply to employees who have been retired for up to 30 years. Another added benefit of the Cancer Trust is faster payouts for firefighters. Payments would start within 10 days of confirmation to the trust of a diagnosed cancer versus 2 or more years, which is currently happening, and there'd be no more invasive investigations.
So, is this a legislatively created trust?
Yes, it's a Senate bill.
Okay. And so they've put that provision in that if the trust is used, then they've changed the way that the presumption of cancer works.
Correct. So it now lies on the employee to prove that it was job-related instead of the employer having to dig through their family history, to find out if it really was job-related or not.
Additional questions for Human Resources?
I have a property liability question.
Tiffany hasn't presented yet.
And I'll wait till you present.
I've already touched on property and liability for 2018, but you'll notice that we had a significant increase in 2018 related to property and liability claims that we're transferring funding to the property and liability fund, and that's simply because we haven't had a dedicated funding source in prior years.
So 500 grand seems like a lot. I don't know if it actually is or not. Can you provide us with some information the next day or so about how much of that is liability, how much of that is property, and how the liability, I'm assuming a portion of this is accidents, auto accidents,
Right.
vehicle accidents.
Right.
So-
City vehicle accidents.
Yeah, so how many do we have? Which departments do they happen in, that kind of stuff?
A big portion of the property and liability also is like if we get big hail claims. So like roof repairs, I know we had a couple fire stations where we did roof repairs and stuff like
Okay.
that. So
And so that's going to be very, very, incredibly variable
Yeah.
from year to year.
Yeah. Last year was a pretty bad year for storms.
Say the least.
And I'll just say our liability, our deductible limits are $5,000 for property and $50,000 for general liability currently.
And I assume that means that we're basically funding all the accidents ourselves.
Yeah, because probably most of them cost more than $5,000.
Maybe have Chief Stevens give driver's ed courses.
Part of the curriculum.
That would be the
So
problem.
one question that comes to mind, Tiffany, is, and we've worked with CIRSA since we were one of the originals with CIRSA, since I think back in the 80s anyway. But is there competition among insurance coverage and carriers that it's worth an RFP or worth some kind of exploration?
Yeah, you know, this came up during our budget discussions because $500,000 seems like a pretty big hit to the general fund. And so we did discuss that. And I think it's time for us to go out and look to see if there is any other opportunities for the city as far as insurance agencies. So we are looking towards doing maybe some kind of RFP or something, put some feelers out there and see what options we have.
In fact, I've discussed the issue with one city manager I know who did go out for an RFP and they did switch. So I think it's worth discussing.
I do too. We're already going to plan on doing that. It
And
could
I've
be
been
like,
involved in that process. In my prior life, we were part of a pool that went out for an RFP and then managed the program after the city went with an RFP and a private provider. So it's definitely something, it's worth even comparing just to make sure you're getting a good deal. And maybe says this is the best deal, and after you've gone out on an RFP, you can see that.
yeah, and it's like with our workers' comp, we're self-funded for workers' comp. We have stop-loss limits and claim limits. And we did go out for an RFP several years ago, and the cost was just enormous to try to go through Pinnacle or something like that for workers' comp. So we decided to stay in-house. And I still think that is where we should go for workers' comp currently. I don't know that we could get any better pricing from an outside source for workers' comp, but property and liability we could certainly look at.
Additional questions for Tiffany? Anything else with Human Services? Okay, thank you. This brings us to an interesting point in our schedule. We have 15 minutes ahead of schedule.
Oh.
That means I have extra time.
No, you
We have 30 minutes to plan for the police presentation, not to exceed. So after the chief is done with his less than 30-minute presentation, I'll ask council if you'd like to do one more department. We could do library and museum. Tim's agreed that he could fill in if necessary.
No.
And
we could have the chief try to finish by kickoff.
8:20 is kickoff. So
5
got us
minutes. Ready?
Go.
So So, Chief, thank you for being here.
Thank you. I appreciate all the support.
And I can be your timer if you like.
All right. So, our only policy question this year is a continuation of last year's. And I thought that since last year I wasn't able to go into enough detail, I would just repeat last year's presentation and add on new stuff for this year, right?
We have it recorded.
Okay, well, you can refer to it then. Basically, as I discussed ad nauseum last year, the police department has experienced an increase in call load, increased in complexity of our calls, increased time per call per officer. Those trends continue into 2018 and through 2017 and projected through 2018 in the future. Last year we talked about the need for 7 additional sworn personnel. We were realistically able to probably achieve 4 during that time frame. You folks were very open to us being able to do whatever we needed to do to reach that 7, even in 2017. So, as we discussed last year, I didn't think it'd be possible because of training limitations to get to the full 7 last year anyway. So let me give you a little update on our staffing and where we're at. Our 2017 budgeted strength is 77 sworn personnel plus 3 pipeline officers, which means in training. Currently we have 71 sworn. 4 of them are in field training right now, so 67 are fully functioning mostly fully functioning solo officers. We have 5 in the academy currently. We have 1, possibly 2 laterals starting in October. They'll have a 2-month FTI program. The 5 academy recruits graduate in December. So if you add all that in for 2017, that'll bring us up to 78 personnel, 11 of which are in some sort of training. 4 of them are currently on the street in field training, if that makes sense. We have some upcoming issues we're looking at for staffing. We know of 1 officer for sure who is going to be lateraling over to Westminster. And then I have heard rumor possibly 2 more unexpected retirements coming soon, although those folks have not made that known to me yet. So our staffing issues continue. Ultimately, this is just the request to move back up to that 80 sworn plus 3 pipeline. And that's the budgeted number for this year.
Questions for the chief?
Do you ever see yourself getting to the point where you're hit the target?
We're close. The biggest challenge are the unexpected departures, right? Whether through tragedies like we had with Officer Bear, to unexpected moves to other organizations, or folks who are retiring like Division Chief Ferber. Friday's her last day. She did, like many people do at the end of their career, decided to move it up from next summer to into this year to I'm leaving at lunch today. So that can happen. But we're working hard to do it. As I discussed last year, our training capacity for field training is limited to, and it's really a drain on our training officers, but 5 simultaneously. Field training takes a minimum of 3 months, 4 months actually. So it's kind of a full-time training cycle, and if people stop leaving, I'm confident that we'll be able to get to that 80 plus 3.
There's something called a Denver boot.
Yeah, chain them to the car. So we're getting there. We're doing way better than we have before. We've made a lot of progress. It's just a matter of getting our folks trained up and out there.
And I'm looking for a very short response to this. But dealing, because I've been asked numerous times, homeless, mental health, and drug abuse, and you can leave suicide to another day.
So we're pretty excited about the continuing growth and success of our co-responder program, where Bailey Meeks, she's our co-responder. She works for All Health, All City Health, and she'll come out and actually make contact with individuals that have needs with the officers at that exact time, as opposed to doing a referral like we do on all of our mental health calls. We'll do a referral, which are a later follow-up. These ones on the correspondent program should come out immediately and make contact contact. She's contacted several of our more well-known homeless individuals in the city who we get some complaints on from the community. Some are more receptive than others to assistance, but she has contacted all of them. We continue to work on that program. Should continue to grow. I'm also very pleased to say that I've had a goal since I became chief 4 years ago that every officer that has contact with the public, including all the dispatchers, will be crisis intervention team trained. It's a 40-hour intensive training for dealing with folks suffering from mental health crisis. I think we are one officer away from completing that goal. And so by the end of this year, we should have that completed. So we're pretty excited about that.
Any updates on drug abuse you want to make us aware of?
No.
Good answer.
Yeah, that was short. Budget highlights, the next slide. We have a couple, SRO grant in 2014, we got a federal grant. We'd be talking about federal strings that come with that grant. It's a 4-year grant, 3 of which are funded by the federal government. Some sort of, it starts out like 75% of the first year's officer salary, then it decreases every year from there. The 4th year, we have to fund 100%. We're in the 4th year of that grant for an SRO grant. We would keep this position regardless. It's our 6th SRO. But then you'll see the $83,000 is reflected in salary and benefits for that. Of that $83,000, I think, Tiffany, that's salary and benefits for a first-year officer. We actually pay more than that for that position because we have senior officers in those positions. Those funds are also offset by Littleton Public Schools, who pays half of all expenses. The second one there, recurring equipment replacement, that's gone up a little bit over the last couple of years. One of those things that I'd just like to highlight, and this is like the SWAT vests that are $4,000 a piece, and 5 years later they're no longer in warranty, right? I don't think anybody wants to test that warranty out, on a tactical vest. LiDARs, all those higher ticket items for us that we have to replace regularly. One thing I was going to talk about here is Narcan. So speaking of drug abuse and opiates, I've addressed this with council previously. The increased opiate issues we're seeing with fentanyl and the other dangerous opiates out there, we are going to be issuing Narcan to our personnel. Of our sworn personnel will have Narcan on their person, mainly for use for first responders. So if we have an accidental overdose or accidental dosage for our personnel, we will be able to self-administer the Narcan. And that's about, we got pretty lucky on this purchase, about $8,000 to do that. But I anticipate the price is going to shoot up as more and more agencies and private sector entities seek out that drug. It's like the EpiPens, when they shot up at 10 times. Right now, we got a pretty good price on Narcan. So
do they expire?
They do after, I think it's 2 years. I'm not sure. I'd have to check. So this will be one of those recurring expenses as we go through. But
when will that be implemented?
we have it now. We're training. We have it on site. The training. We're have training scheduled coming up. So it's pretty simple training. That's pretty much it.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Can you talk about training officers? You have a dog in training now?
Actually, thank you for good timing. We have a new canine, Zan. Zan's a 2-year-old German Shepherd Malinois mix. We got Zan from Gold Coast Canines out in California. Zan, we sent a trainer, Krista Handstrom's our new canine handler after the retirement of Sabre. So Krista's going to have Zan, and she spent the last 8 weeks out in California training with the dog. That cost about $20,000 for the dog and the training, and that was paid for by the Friends of Littleton Canine, 100% of that. So we pay Krista's salary, obviously, the vehicle and that type of thing, but most of the other canine expenses are paid for through our volunteers. Zan came back today. They graduated on Friday, and he was actually in the station. And
is he wearing his little cap and gown?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, but
he bite anybody?
No, he seems very well. But some pretty cool video of Zan. And I think I talked to you guys about one of the things they do in the training is they do a sensory training on the dogs where they hold a bite through different distractions. And being in California, a distraction I had never seen before was kind of interesting is they go into the ocean and the surf and the surf is pounding in, and these are pretty good waves, a couple foot waves pounding in on the surf. And they have someone in a bite suit about 150 feet down the shore. The handler holds the Zan and then gives the command and releases, and Zan has to go through the surf and engage in a bite and hold the bite until ordered to release by the handler. Despite the fact that dog's in water, underwater, getting pounded by surf, the person splashing them, and to watch the dog do that was pretty impressive. So if we have anybody go into like Kettering Lake, Zan's our dog. Yeah, maybe a water fountain, I don't know, but that's pretty cool. So Zan's here, and we're going to make sure that Zan and Coda, our other canine, are on the same page as to how we operate, and then we'll have both those dogs out there in service. Cool. Any questions?
Additional questions for the chief? Who's keeping track? No.
It's got to be a
Okay,
personal
no
record.
more questions for the chief. Thank you, sir. Okay, it is 8:25. There should be a reward for efficiency. The reward would be we go home. But if council's consensus is they'd like to do one more department, Tim Noon said he would step up and take one for the team.
I can do it in 5 minutes.
He changed his mind.
Okay, I'm not seeing great enthusiasm, so I'm sorry. I think we're going home. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.